Good morning and welcome to Payments Canada Summit panel brief titled Sharing Payment Innovation Across Jurisdictions. My name is George Evers. I'm Head of Market Enablement within Transfer Solutions at Mastercard. And I'm delighted to be joined by a super panel from jurisdictions around the world, some with maturing payment modernization programs, others at the start and the origins of their own programs. Joining me on the call today will be Katrina Stuart, who is the General Manager of Business Payments at Australian Payments Plus. I'm also joined by Kevin O'Neill, Director of Strategic Relationships and Head of Canada for SWIFT, and Ritesh Shukla, CEO, National Payments Corporation India, NPCI, for International Payments Limited. So a super panel with, as I said, varying degrees of maturity around their modernization programs. So I'm confident we're going to get a really interesting set of perspectives on payments modernization around the world. Okay, so first of all, if I can start with some brief introductions for the panel, just a minute or so each to talk about your role and the organization you're representing. So Katrina, can I start with you?
Well, thanks, George. So I work at Australian Payments Plus, which is our newly formed domestic payment organisation as of about 12 months ago, which brings together our domestic debit card scheme, our real-time payments infrastructure, the new payments platform, and also BPay, our bill payment infrastructure. And I'm responsible for business payments, which incorporates our real-time payments portfolio, as well as BPay from a bill payment perspective. And we've had the MPP up and running now in Australia for about 5 years. So started that journey a couple of years ago and seen some exciting times.
Thank you, Katrina. And Kevin.
Hey, greetings to our audience and my fellow panelists. It's great to be part of the conversation. I lead SWIFT's activities in Canada with my global colleagues. SWIFT, as many of you probably know, provides tools to the Canadian community and the global community across all types of transactions, payment, securities, foreign exchange. And then the Canadian team works across the community, including companies, financial institutions, as well as, of course, working closely with Payments Canada, the market infrastructure, to implement their payments and other activities for their clients and our clients and their clients' clients.
Thank you, Kevin. And Ritesh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ritesh Shukla, and I'm the CEO for NPCI International. NPCI International is a wholly owned subsidiary of National Payment Corporation of India. We as an organization, operate a multi-rail network. We have, we operate UPI, which is, world's most scaled up fast payment platform. We have RuPay card scheme, which is 4th largest card scheme globally. And apart from these two, we also operate our own bill payment platform that has about 19,000 billers. We have a highway automation system and various other programs. My organization is all about developing collaboration at a global stage. We are looking at building interoperability. We are looking at working with other countries to help them create sovereign payment ecosystems. And I'm so glad to be part of this panel and looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you all very much. Okay, so let's get into the questions here. So as I said at the start, we've got kind of different levels of maturity. So I'm interested in the different responses we're going to get to some of these questions. So if we think about some of the foundations that have been laid or are being laid for these new payment systems, there are certain characteristics of them that are generally consistent in terms of the adoption of ISO 20022, their speed in terms of moving from either batch or slow or same-day clearing to real-time and instant clearing as well, and often instant clearing and settlement as well. So what's happening is we're seeing these payments increasing in speed, new players coming into the ecosystem, new ecosystems that allow for innovation, modernization, around that core infrastructure, particularly around the adoption and accelerated adoption of digital payments around the world. The pandemic did a lot to accelerate that as well. So what does payment innovation look like in each of your jurisdictions today? How would you describe it? How would you describe that ecosystem? What's happening and the key characteristics of it? If I can start with you, Ritesh.
So thank you for the question, George. So I think if we look at India and the organization that I represent, NPCI, we can proudly say that we are touching lives of most Indians on a daily basis through a variety of payment services that we offer, and we are at the center of it. The way we see ourselves as we are more like Uber and Airbnb of payment. And let's focus on one of our platforms, UPI. So if you look at UPI is a platform that is enabling consumers connect any of their app with any of the funding source. So if you're in India, you can download a Google Pay or a WhatsApp Pay, Amazon Pay, or any of the bank provided apps, and you can connect with those apps to any funding source. It could be a checking account, savings account, overdraft account, or even now RuPay credit cards. And once you've kind of done that, then you can make any to any payments with complete interoperability. And we have about 300 million plus QR points in India. So that actually speaks of the scale that we have gained. And in the month of March, we processed about 8.7 billion transactions on UPI platform. So there's amazing stuff happening. And in terms of innovation, our approach has been very, very simple, because we are all about democratizing payments. So we are not only adding new consumers every month as we grow, we are also adding variety of new use cases, which we'll talk about in following questions in the session. So we are very, very excited to be where we are, and we are playing a very, very important role in terms of enabling collaboration, in terms of enabling players who participate on demand as well as supply side, create newer use cases and drive deeper adoption.
Thank you, Ritesh. Fascinating. And I think as Katrina, as you get into the response, and Kevin, I think I started with Ritesh for a reason, in terms of just the breadth and the approach there. It's worth reflecting on what's kind of similar, but also what's different about the programs and the infrastructure in the other markets as well. So Katrina.
Thanks, George. So I don't think we can compete in terms of the volume of transactions that my Indian colleague sees, but maybe we can compete on other metrics. So the MPP has been up and running, as I said, about 5 years. We account for about 1 in 3 of all account-to-account payments in Australia. We started off with really just a kind of sort of fairly simple sort of push payment, that if I'm paying friends or family, the banks were moving all of that over to the MPP. Over the last sort of 5 years, we've seen an expansion in the use of the MPP. So starting to be used more and more for consumer to business payments, and particularly using PayID, our addressing service. And the innovation that we've seen there is basically large biller organisations using PayID and creating a unique PayID for each customer and using that for their customers to pay them. And because it's a unique PayID, they can actually ensure that all the reconciliation information is there. You're not actually relying on the customer to input that at the point of payment, which has always been one of the pain points. And increasingly, we're seeing use by businesses, particularly more for sort of business to consumer payments. So things like travel insurance claims, and we're seeing expansion of use of the MPP into rental payments, for share trading, for digital wallet top-ups, and increasingly being used by the government as well. Particularly last year during COVID, we saw our social welfare agency use the MPP at scale to send out COVID payments over the weekend to citizens in need. They also have a tendency to make large payments. So as of this week, we've just hit a new record with the single largest transaction on the MPP being $39.3 billion. So I'm not anticipating we're going to break that record anytime soon. And then mid last year, we started to roll out our new payment initiation service, Pay2. And we're really excited about what we think that's going to enable, because once you can actually have payment initiation in a real-time sense, it really opens up the use cases that real-time payments infrastructure can be used for. So not only can I, set up my recurring payments using that, but I can start to do things like in-app payments and e-commerce, but also as a business, I can ask an organisation like my cloud accounting software provider to facilitate my payroll transactions or my pension payments or my tax payments. And it can be used together, say, with things like e-invoicing. So from a B2B payment perspective, we actually think that's going to be really exciting and really interesting over the coming months and years as well.
Thank you. And fascinating. And in this coming out, some of the commonalities around the importance of consumer experience and simplifying that, and that being open, or Ritesh, an example of people using their Google app to access the system, or any app they want to use, but equally Katrina with the simplification in terms of pay directories and IDs. I think historically we've kind of wrapped our consumers and businesses around the design of our payment systems rather than the other way around. So it's good to see that trend continue. And Kevin, if I can just finish up with.
Sure. Hi. Thank you. I would say SWIFT has the benefit looking across many jurisdictions, over 200 different jurisdictions around the world. Certainly some common themes in terms of what Ritesh and Katrina said in terms of anyone, anywhere, anytime types of payments, identifying and pre-validating issues with payments upfront, so you don't have to do it at time of payment. But indeed, the global community has invested a lot over the last years, not only towards speed, but towards track and trace and security. And these investments have really started to pay off. So we're well on our way towards meeting G20 targets of 75% of payments within an hour. So for example, 2/3 of GPI payments globally are now credited to end beneficiary within 30 minutes or less. Almost half of those are within 5 minutes, and many of those are in seconds. So for example, into India, depending on the purpose of payment, you can have a less than 10-second response time from anywhere in the world. So it's possible. We're looking to drive adoption of some of these tools and techniques to bring that better global experience to people. Some of the tangential benefits are also is now we understand why things slow down, now that we can measure around the globe, and you can start to work on those points of friction. And so I mentioned payments pre-validation to try and make things go even faster. And then also looking at how do we bring that tracking and tracing from a fee perspective for a better experience. So Swift Go represents that next iteration of GPI. The average transaction time there is in 3 seconds, with a level of fee transparency, but also guarantee that the principal is going to get there. So we see a lot of great trends building on the work the community has done, and look forward to engaging with the global community to take those things forward.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next question is, so look, payments are really about meeting the needs of business and consumers. And I've heard some really good examples of here, probably some 2 records actually. I suspect that those payment volumes in India are certainly the largest in the world. I mean, 8 billion in a month. I think there were only a few years ago, that was almost the annual amount across the faster payments network in the UK. And I don't think I'll come close to 39 billion as a payment that's gone through again through an instant payment system in another market. And again, I think probably a characteristic of the design decision you made in Australia with the system itself in terms of clearing and settlement in essence being the same event. So they're really about meeting the needs of businesses and consumers and enabling the flow of their funds. And so in spite of change, fundamentally the expectations are for easier, smarter, and safer payment options. Where do you see commonalities in payments expectations and needs across the jurisdictions? Do you think there are a lot of those, or do you think your modernization programs have been addressing quite different challenges within your jurisdictions? If I can start with you, Katrina.
No, I think there is a lot of commonality across the world. I mean, I think as a kind of retail banking customer, I want faster, easier payments, and certainly I probably want to be able to do them digitally as well. I mean, long gone are the days of going into the branch or I mean, even these days, sort of dealing with internet banking seems a bit kind of sort of, old-fashioned. And so I think there's a lot of commonality in terms of people just expect things to be fast these days. I think there definitely needs to be a balance in terms of the security and the safety of it as well. And so when we think about real-time payments, I think it's also about how can we make things better as well, and make it an improvement on other payment alternatives within the marketplace. And I think from a business perspective, I think there's a lot of commonalities in terms of how you can help corporates to upgrade some of their payment processing and other related processes that probably been the same way in many cases for 20, 30, 40 years. and they're just ripe for modernisation in terms of being able to make them a lot more efficient. I think real-time payments provides payment confirmation. I know basically immediately if my payment's been successful or not. I don't have to wait 2 days on the legacy system to find out that that's the case. And then I don't need to kind of go through a lot of manual exception processing to then work out what went wrong and trying to try that again. And I think also, and I think we'll probably touch on it a bit later from a data perspective, how that can basically enhance that whole kind of payment journey as well from a corporate perspective. And I think we're just kind of starting to see some of the benefits there. But I think sort of the reasons why, a country would want to embrace real-time payments is common across the world. And certainly, I think we find when we get together and talk about our experiences, there's a lot more commonalities than differences, I think, that we find.
Okay, thank you. And Ritesh, I think that there's going to be some commonality, but I think you may have a slightly different answer as well in terms of the drivers and motivation for the modernization.
So George, as you rightly said, the drivers and the motivation for transformation. I think India, if you look at our country, we have been at the forefront of digital transformation, and there are 2-3 factors that I would like to call out here that have kind of led us to be where we are. I think one is, today we have about 1.2 billion people who are connected to internet. And, the median age here is 28 years. So a young population, 1.2 billion people connected to internet. We have amongst the cheapest data in the world. I think a 1 GB of data in India would cost you about 18 to 17 US cents. So it's cheap data, highly young population, and very well connected. And if you layer it on top of this, you layer it with our digital ID program, Aadhaar, which has about 1.33 billion people who are part of it. And every Indian has a 12-digit unique ID number. Behind that ID number are my biometrics stored on cloud. And that actually enables people authenticate themselves remotely. So internet as a way to connect, and then Aadhaar as a way to authenticate yourself. And this along with the UPI as a payment layer kind of is driving the transformation that we are seeing. And today about 65% of the retail payments in India are processed on UPI, and about 40% of world's instant payments are processed in India on UPI. So that kind of shows the scale that we have developed. In terms of we are very, very keen to explore collaboration with other players across the world, because we believe we have so much of learning, we have so much of insights that we have created because of our experience, and we're happy to share with others whosoever is interested to help them pursue their journey of driving digital payments. Because why should you reinvent the wheel in today's age and time? So we're happy to share what we have learned and what we have gathered. Apart from that, I think one of the other area that we are very, very keen to pursue is kind of creating interoperability with different countries. And one such example is that we have connected UPI in India with PayNow in Singapore. So people sitting in India or people sitting in Singapore can send money to each other simply using UPI ID or mobile number within seconds. And this happens at the speed of light. And I think the launch happened in February. The 2 prime ministers of 2 countries came together, and it was done. And we are seeing a very, very good traction. We would like to create similar interoperability not only for personal payments but for merchant payments, because these are important areas. Globally, if you look at I think about 30 million Indians who live outside India, and they send about $100 billion every year home. And the cost of remittance, can be, I think as per World Bank average is about 6%. So how can we bring that cost down? And often there is a joke, and since this event is hosted by Canada, so there is a joke here in India that if you fly to Canada and hand over money to a person, that'll be faster than sending money from here to Canada. If your son or daughter happens to study there. So we're looking at creating those connections so that there is more benefit and value for the end consumers, and there is speed, there is transparency, and there is simple user experience without complications of it.
Thank you. And I think it's especially interesting the importance and the role, and actually the differences in terms of our sense on what digital identity can be. So we are now blessed with mobile phone numbers, email addresses, identities that are in essence digital and can be leveraged make it easier for other people to route payments to us. But I also understand within India, building out that digital identity infrastructure at a national level as a really important enabler of many different digitization services, and we hit some political blockers to that in other countries as well. But to me, digital identity and payments and the adoption of these services are tightly linked as well. So, but Kevin, I'll hand over to you in terms of, you may want to respond to the speed of payments between Canada and India as well.
No, absolutely happy to. And look, you as some common themes as well, right? So Katrina, it's all about speed. It's all about that move to instant, but it's also about payment certainty. It's also about payment tracking. And, as I said, now that we can track and understand where things slow down, so, the use case of flying, it doesn't have to be that way. Now, are we at a universal experience where you're getting seconds or within 5 minutes? We're not there yet, but it's certainly within that realm of possibility. And so some of the things that do slow things down are around currency controls and sanctions, and making sure the purposes of these payments are for good. And a lot of those things, and we'll talk about security and those, as well as financial crime compliance as we talk a little bit later in the panel. But we have the benefit to collaborate in India, in Australia, around the globe, and looking for some of those common themes to create those efficiencies, to drive adoption of tools that will continue to improve on the user experience, that instant, secure, and frictionless. But we see this trend towards embedded payments, reducing cost, reducing friction. And Ritesh, you talked about the concept of interoperability. And as we move to common data standards like ISO 20022, that will allow for these interoperabilities, while we also balance the need for security, compliance, privacy, those types of things. And we see that path evolving, but the industry has also made great progress along the way as well.
Okay, thank you all. So we've touched on a couple of times the nature, the importance of safety and security, but I'd like to dig a bit deeper on that. So, and start with Ritesh. So can you talk a little bit about, I guess, kind of the nature of kind of the security and fraud risks, whether or not that's create any constraints on what you've been able to do with the infrastructure, and some of the actions you've taken to build in and create a safer and a secure infrastructure as well. And then we'll move around the panel on that question.
So, while safety and security hasn't been kind of if I can use the word bump in our kind of journey forward, but I think we are very, very mindful of it as an important consideration in the mind of consumers. And here, I think the approach that we have taken is, is to educate consumers, is to create awareness about what to do and what not to do. And also that kind of stems from the fact that your ability to identify trends, your ability to read data and see what is happening at a very, very early stage or what is likely to happen, learning from other markets, and then you invest in educating consumers. So for example, we went into a hyperdrive and educate people that to receive funds, you don't need to share your PIN with anybody, because there was and we all at least at some point in time have received an email from a Nigerian billionaire who is kind of claims that you have won the lottery and you kind of share your details. So I think that thing has continued, and people often get calls sometimes from overseas callers as well, that you've got this lottery and you share your account details and your UPI PIN and we'll credit the money. So some people fall prey to it and they share PIN and they realize that instead of getting the money has gone. So we have gone into hyperdrive in terms of educating consumers on what to do, what not to do. We use a mix of digital as well as print media. We do a lot of advertising in different languages because we have different languages that get spoken in India. So that's one thing we do very, very actively, and we collaborate with different players. We collaborate with banks, financial institutions. We collaborate with fintechs and big techs. For example, PhonePe, which is the largest player in the ecosystem here, Google Pay. So these are people who are very, very deeply connected, or they talk to consumers more than we talk because we are a network. So we collaborate with them. We share, insights, we share learnings, we share our experiences, and we help them build that level of awareness and build that level of check. Apart from that, we also leverage data very, very effectively. So if we see that a transaction is likely to be a risky transaction, we at times often decline those transactions also at network level. So we take those measures. We also work very, very closely with agencies and authorities because cybercrime is globally a threat, and it really can shake confidence of consumers. So we proactively work with a lot of authorities and agencies, and often given we are a multi-rail network, we also take an enterprise level view. So given we have visibility to different rails, so you can take an enterprise level view, and you can proactively address a problem, then wait for it to scale up, and then try and look at it in a reactive manner. So those are some of the things we do, and I think our fraud rates are, if I'm to believe, are way below global averages. So we are in a safe space, but this is one area that you can never be you're sure of, and you always have to be on your toes, because it's all about dealing with other people's money. So we are very, very mindful of that.
And Katrina, any learnings from Australia?
Yes, I mean, I think certainly in Australia, probably no different from anywhere else around the world, scams are becoming an increasingly growing concern. And I think last year, Australians lost about $3 billion to scams, which is growing about 50% year on year. It's obviously that's not unique just to real-time payments, but when you do have real-time payments, it does enable the fraudsters to move those funds around much faster, and for the chances of being able to recover those funds much lower. I think what we've seen in Australia is certainly the power of things like confirmation of payee that we went live with when we launched the MPP, so that I can actually get confirmation of who I'm paying before I make that payment. And we did some research last year that revealed that 1 in 4 users of our Pay ID service had actually stopped or edited a payment before making it, because they could actually see who they're paying. And I think that's extraordinarily powerful. And so, one of the things we're looking at here is how can you sort of extend that out to sort of looking also at sort of BSB or sort code and account number payments as well. I think also in Australia, we are looking at opportunities around digital identity. So that's something we've been talking about in the market for a long time. But later this year, we're looking to actually launch a digital identity solution from Australian Payments Plus. And I think, when you can bring some of that together with real-time payments, it does really kind of create some stronger safeguards for consumers as well. I think it's also about when we think about how we extend real-time payment capability, we're trying to keep sort of safety and security front of mind for customers as well. So one of the benefits of our Pay2 service is that customers are actually having to authenticate themselves in their banking channel and then actually approve that agreement within that channel, which is certainly safer and more secure than maybe how I'm using payments elsewhere in terms of setting up a direct debit payment or even with cards as well. So I think it's an area where you can certainly never be complacent, and it does require a kind of a whole industry-wide approach. But there's, I think, definitely benefits that real-time payments can bring as well in that space.
Okay, thank you. And Kevin?
I'll build on, Katrina's industry-wide approach. Obviously, from a SWIFT perspective, secure and compliant payments are across the ecosystems. Those are table stakes. That's a core foundation that everybody expects. So you have to have security first as you're designing and building products. You also have to have compliance first. You have to have privacy by design. And when you have $39 billion going out in a single transaction, you have to also build in tools that you can try and retrieve those types of funds, or at least get to the endpoint. So we at SWIFT focus on how do we enable those types of tools to the community, and how do we build from the ground up with all these principles. Talking about the happy path is always easy. The unhappy path as to why things slow down, where do things go wrong, and then what you do is often an interesting conversation, but we spend a lot of time and attention on making sure we build that from the ground up. Building on some of the themes, I'd say, increasingly it becomes applying things like artificial intelligence. So, Ritesh talked about trends and reading data. So we're applying behind the scenes looking at those types of trends in the term of anomaly detection, right? In terms of, hey, has this payment been sent before? Is it out of hours? So we make tools available to the community, and the community uses those types of tools. But Katrina talked about account and name match is something that, when you see that confirmation that you're actually paying the right person, those tools exist today. And, being able to do that match through something like a pre-validation will continue to bring some of those, fraud attempts down. The community has invested a lot of money in security through the customer security program, and that's paid a lot of dividends, right? And the other thing I would add is, as you begin to roll out products and services, it's looking at everyone's going at their own pace, and some are ready to go faster, some are perhaps lagging, but it's working with the community and those early adopters to make sure the tools that you're building don't have unintended consequences, and that you're rolling things out in a way that is scalable, but also provides that safety and soundness to the community.
And thank you all. And I think kind of the common theme I really heard across all of those examples is it is everybody's challenge, everybody's responsibility. I think consumer education is really important, but there is a ton of stuff that we as the providers, participants in and provisioners of services who also depend on these infrastructures can provide as well. One of the things I think that we discovered, it was interesting, although not expected with real-time payments, certainly in the UK, is whilst fraud could move faster through the network, in some respects, the real-time network can light up that path of fraud. And you can see where you have networks of money mule accounts, etc. So being able to identify those things actually means that we can do more as a community to protect our end users as well. I've also seen a real shift from the consumer responsibility to the community's responsibility for making this safer and secure. Some of that through regulation, but I think some of that through recognition that these very powerful payment systems, it is our responsibility to make them as safe and secure as we can and to protect the consumers as they use them. Okay.
George, if I could just make a note here, sorry, a little bit of off script, but if anybody on the panel has any tips on how to get your kids not to click on links, that would be much appreciated, because you can educate as much as you want, but yeah, Dad, forget about it. There are real risks that people need to take seriously.
I'll bear that in mind. Right, I'm going to move on to kind of the second area which I often talked about within modernization programs, which is around the benefits of richer data and a broader data set. And I just really am interested in your perspectives from these different jurisdictions, as how that, if that's been realized in the propositions that you've been made available to your end users as well. So Katrina, can I start with you on this one?
Yes, certainly. I would say in Australia, I think we're very much at the start of that journey. I think from our experience, there is a large collective effort just to kind of stand up real-time payments infrastructure and sort of embed some of that foundational capability just in terms of how those payments work, and then kind of extending that out to things like payment initiation capability. And I kind of feel that sort of data is going to be the next kind of cab off the rank, if you like. We are looking here in Australia at how we migrate across all of our legacy batch payments over to the MPP over the next 5 to 7 years, with the intention that we would actually then close down that legacy infrastructure. And I think that might be a bit more of a catalyst for us to really kind of sort of move forward on the data front. So today we've got the ability to be able to send like 240 characters with the payment, which is great. If I'm a consumer, I can say, George, it was great to see you last night. Thanks for dinner, smiley face emojis, because we support emojis as well in the payment message. But that's been a little bit limited, I think, from a business perspective that we've seen to date. But I think as we think about how we move over batch payments, and we're really focusing on how do we use more of the structured data capabilities that the ISO message has, and really bring some of that to life, and really focusing on, for different payment types, be it payroll or superannuation or for e-invoicing, how can we incorporate some of that data into the payment message? And I think what we'll see is starting to utilize some of that in terms of structured data, but then building upon it over the years as well. And that's when I think we'll start to see some more of those benefits. We have seen some of our kind of payment service providers really start to capture some of the benefits around data via APIs as well. The challenge, though, for a lot of corporates is they obviously aren't used to being able to receive that data as well. And what do they do once they receive it, and how do they actually ingest it into their processes? And I think that is a kind of sort of long-term journey that will take some time. So I think that it's really early days for us here in Australia.
Yeah, thank you. It also kind of seems to me that with regard kind of the value of richer data, there's a lot more information that tends to be in a request for payment. So you start off with lots of information in something like an invoice. And I think it depends a little bit on the adoption of services like request to payment and the use of those within corporates as well. And then I think we'll start to see some more data use. Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about the promise of richer data?
Oh, absolutely. And obviously the community has made great achievements, but I would agree with Katrina in terms of we're at the start of the journey, and really like the use of the word structured, because that structure is the ultimate kind of promise that will help efficiencies, and also looking at things from an end-to-end perspective. So from the consumer, from the corporate, right through to actual settlement is all very important. So a lot of great promise, a lot of great work that has been done. But I think it's also important that the community looks at this as not just as a mandatory regulatory change, right? The promise and the people who will do better with ISO are those that can go faster and deliver on that promise of better use cases, usage of things like APIs. So by 2025, cross-border, as well as in many domestic infrastructures like India, like Canada, like Australia, about 90% of payments are expected to leverage ISO 20022. But that richer structured data is really where the promise is. And we're continuing to work with the community over the next few years to drive that adoption, that structure, and ultimately better experiences for the entire financial ecosystem.
Thank you. And Ritesh, then I'm just thinking about some of your stats in terms of the 8 billion payments a month, and whether or not you'd want to have a lot more data flowing with those payments, even with your low cost for data transfer. So I'd welcome your thoughts on the importance of the data.
Thank you, George. I think we as an organization realize that we are living in age of sensors, sensors everywhere, your car, your devices, traffic and everywhere. So if you're living in the age of sensors, these sensors are creating data, right? These sensors are creating data point. So you have to have the processing capability to mine that data and to kind of draw rich, inferences out of it. So we as an organization, we are investing a lot in this area. And, some of the things that we are doing, we are very focused on AI, we are focused on machine learning, and we are investing a lot into this. We are investing a lot into the analytics and the platforms around it, and there is huge potential around it. What we are doing currently, I think, is we are looking at mining our existing data to kind of make smart decisions and smart decisioning, primarily in the authorization area to speak with now, primarily in the area of fraud prevention. And so these are some of the areas that are very, very relevant, and we're doing that. But as we look into the future, I think there is a lot more that one will be able to do. And given we are operating multiple rails, and I'm again coming to that point, right? For example, there are 19,000 billers that are connected to our bill payment platform. We have automated about 900 highways in India, so we know how commuters are moving around, how bill payment is happening, and there's a lot of synergies you can draw by cross connecting these platforms. And so there are immense possibilities. We as an organization have identified the potential and the possibilities, and we are making big investments into those areas. And like I said before, we are happy to share with others who are interested in developing similar capabilities, because there is a lot of benefit to be derived from this, and that's our view.
No, a fascinating and great point around kind of all the contextual information that goes with the payment. I think there's a tendency to have these sit within silos. So a bank will know about its consumers, log on where its mobile is, etc. That data, but that will be only held with that bank. And starting to share that more broadly as a community as well, I think could also be very valuable in terms of understanding fraud dynamics, helping combat fraud, and it not being such a lonely thing for an individual bank that's managing, malware or something like that for its area as well. So I think when we think about data, we have a tendency to think about maybe more data with the payment, so an invoice, for example, but actually you made a great point around that contextual data. Where is it? What information surrounds the payment being made, a vehicle, etc., a mobile phone? So Ritesh, you were going to make another point.
Yeah, so I just wanted to qualify that, and all this has to happen within the data privacy, framework. So that is
exactly,
again very, very important element of how we utilize data, how we ensure that it is used for good purpose within the permissible, framework of a particular geography.
Yeah,
so that's something I will conclude with.
Exactly, and I think in many respects that kind of level of trust, consumer protection, and alignment with things like GDPR and the rules that we have in place to protect consumers and their data is much more difficult to negotiate and manage than the technology itself. But it's vital, I think, vital to maintain trust. Okay, thank you all very much. So look, we're close to the end of the panel, so I want to close out with a couple of thoughts from each of you on what payment trends do you think will be, have the biggest impact on your organizations over the coming years. If I start with you, Kevin.
Great, thanks. And just maybe picking up on the theme, technology is, kind of the easy part. I talked about the happy, unhappy path. I was really glad, Ritesh, you came back and started talking about, privacy. There are ways that you can hash, you can pseudonymize, this type of data and still use and share that information for good. So an example is, payments pre-validation, where we look at accounts that have been used on the network before and provide that information to say you have an indication, not a guarantee, but an indication that it's a good payment. And we provide that service to our community. But indeed, digitization has definitely improved and also raised the bar in terms of expectation. But I would say tools do exist to start to solve some of these challenges: pre-validation, instant fee transparency. I talked earlier about machine learning and AI, but also AI for good, right? And making sure that you're using it in a responsible way. And whether that's in the front end of a payment or behind the scenes around anomaly detection, we're looking at providing those tools to the community. And I think you will start to see that become even more prevalent as we move forward. And of course, in 2023, it'd be hard not to talk about ISO 20022, providing that base level for that interoperability, right? Because nothing ever really goes away. But as the community kind of builds on what we've invested in for years, ISO and that structured data will provide that data analytics and that extra information across the entire ecosystem, from consumer to corporate, right through to actual settlement through domestic market infrastructure. So we think we're really excited about the opportunities and the tools that are available, and working with the community and partners like Ritesh and Katrina and the folks in Canada to move things forward even more going forward.
Thank you, Kevin. And Katrina.
I'm not sure I can confine it to one, George, to be honest, but
I'll give you two.
Certainly, I think certainly we think that the rollout and adoption of our Pay2 service will really transform payments in the Australian market, because I think not just from a kind of consumer perspective in terms of enabling many more payments to happen, say, within my digital wallet or within apps for online commerce, and even taking real-time account-to-account payments to point of sale, but really on that business side as well. So we've got interest from the securities market, starting to look at things like kind of custodial payments, etc. And I think it will really kind of touch every aspect of payments in the marketplace. And I think that, together with a launch of a digital identity solution as well, I think we'll really see changes to how people make payments in the Australian market, which I think is really exciting times.
Thank you very much. And Ritesh, if I can just finish with you.
So like Katrina, I think there's more than one. I think one is we hope the momentum that we have gained in terms of displacing cash is likely to continue, and we hope to capitalize on that. That's one. The other is we are also looking at unlocking cross-border flows, and that's something as a priority area we will continue to work on. That's second. And the third, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the market. I mean, while we talked about UPI, Aadhaar as platforms, there are various other platforms that are being created in different stages in India. And there's one such called Open Network for Digital Commerce, which is actually looking at enabling small retailers come and sell online to anybody in the whole world. So I think that's again going to unlock a lot of digital flows for us. So not one, but I think that these are some of the things that we are looking at, and of course data, as I said earlier. So I think 4-5 things to watch out for. But I think we are in a very good space, and we have a strong momentum. We hope to carry it on.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for a fascinating panel. I think that exceeded my expectations in terms of some amazing examples of what's happening around the world, and also some thoughts on where we're going next. So thank you all very much.